boys and girls. Mrs. Blackburn here for today's shared read. Let's go ahead and begin. Okay, we are on shared read day 1. It's our STAR practice. Our learning goal: students will identify changes in spelling with affixes when affixes are added, compound words, and figurative language in the STAR passage. Our success criteria: I can successfully identify words that double the consonants when a suffix is added, figurative language, and compound words in the STAR passage. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in so we can see this better. You can try to go ahead and read this along with me. We're going to highlight some special keywords as we're going. The 3 little sprigs. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I pay special attention to this word sprigs. It looks kind of like spring, but there is no N in there. I'm also going to notice that this is a play. So I'm going to highlight the different parts. We have narrator, sprig 1, sprig 2, sprig 3, Peter, and those would be the parts in our play. So this is drama. That's the genre that we'll be working with today in our STAR passage. So that's very important to identify that. So that's the first thing that we'll be doing, is highlighting those and paying special attention to the organization and the text structure here. Narrator. Once upon a time, 3 little sprigs of grass went out into the world. They were very young and very inexperienced. The 3 little sprigs had much to learn about surviving and thriving in the harsh conditions of the open meadow. The big bad cottontails were everywhere, munching and crunching on producers of all types. Read on to see how the 3 little sprigs became a healthy fixture in the meadow's energy web. So this narrator has a job, a role in a drama of telling the background information before we begin the play. So there's lots of fun things in here that the narrator reads. First of all, I notice inexperienced has a prefix and a suffix added to the end of that. So I'm going to highlight that. The other thing I noticed is that I like how it says surviving and thriving. It's kind of fun how the writer and the author wrote that. The big bad cottontails. I'm going to highlight cottontails because that's a compound word. Remember, a compound word is a word that has 2 words in it. We have cotton and we have tails. And here again, we have surviving, thriving, munching, and crunching. So I like how the author wrote all of these ing words. They're fun to read, and it makes it more interesting for the reader. Now, do we remember what we call the author of a play? Yes, we call that a playwright. So yes, and we call this the script. So that's some vocabulary that we need to remember. We have a playwright as the author, again, of a play, and then we call the actual play, the written part, the script. So here we go on. Sprig 1, life in a meadow is no tiptoe, here's another compound word, through the tulips. I'm going to highlight that whole part there. Let me tell you. So tiptoe through the tulips. We talked about figurative and literal language earlier this year. So does this literally mean that they are tiptoeing through the tulips? Absolutely not. So this is what we call figurative language. Figurative language. And what do you think that means there? Life in a meadow is no tiptoe through the tulips, let me tell you. Well, Tiptoe Through the Tulips actually was a song, and it was about love. So what they're saying is that life in a meadow is not all about love and peace. And so they don't mean it literally. They mean that it's not all pleasant. That's right, sister. The realities of life at the bottom of the food chain can be a real roller coaster. So here we have the realities of life at the bottom of the food chain can be a real roller coaster. Here we have some more figurative language. They don't mean that it's a real roller coaster. It's not literal. What they mean here is at the bottom of the food chain. Now, if we think about our food chain, you don't want to be at the bottom, because if you remember the food chain and how that works, if you're at the top, that means that nothing is eating you. Everything at the bottom is getting eaten by something else, right, as you go down the food chain. And then it says it can be a real roller coaster. So that means it has its ups and its downs, right? Like a roller coaster, it goes up and down. So this is a comparison of two things. We do not have like or as. And if you remember, if you compare two things that are very different, that do not have like or as, we call that a metaphor. Very good. So this is a metaphor. Okay, well done. One day we have ample sunshine, fresh air, healthy soil with lots of nutrients and available moisture. Before you know it, the sun has become a scorching, cruel tyrant. I like this word tyrant. So using context clues, I'm going to figure out what that word means. So before you know it, the sun has become a scorching, cruel tyrant. I'm going to use these context clues here. It says that it's cruel. So that's an adjective for this word tyrant. I'm thinking tyrant must be something horrible, because it says cruel, and cruel means horrible. So it says the sun has become a scorching, cruel tyrant. So I'm thinking that means that it's something terrible. Rain is a friend from your distant past. Sprig 3. The soil dries up, compacts, and squeezes your rhizomes like a vice, and the consumers are the worst. Don't even get me started. So we have more figurative language here. The soil dries up, compacts, and squeezes your rhizomes like a vice. So it's comparing the soil and your rhizomes like a vice. A vice is something that clamps together, and it uses the word like, and it's comparing two different things. So we did use like in here, and this is a simile. Okay, the big bad cottontails, here we have compound word again, cotton and tails, frightened us the most. They munched and they crunched and they chewed the stems down. I like how that's kind of playing off of the big bad wolf and the three little pigs. Munched and crunched and chewed the stems down. All the sun's sweet, sweet energy that had stored was stolen. Now, they use more figurative language here. We have sun, sweet, sweet, stored, stolen. When you repeat the same consonant sound over and over again, what do we call that? We call that alliteration. Very good. That's alliteration. So that is another form of figurative language used here. Except they ate all through the day. I don't know how we made it to adulthood. Perhaps our other guest, Peter Cottontail, might like to share some insights. Are we missing some perspective, Peter? Thank you, narrator, for hosting me today. And yes, there is another side to the story. First things first, these little sprigs weren't all alone in the world. They were part of a vibrant community of productive grasses, sedges, and plants. And they have a role to play, which I fully appreciate. They convert the sun's light into food for the rest of us. They transfer energy too. Transfer energy? We are robbed. Over our trimmed and cropped bodies does the sun's energy get transferred. So let's take a look at robbed, trimmed, cropped, and transferred. If you take a special look at those words, what happened to the consonants when they added ed at the end? Robbed, trimmed, cropped, and transferred. Yes, they doubled the consonant. Double P, double B, double M, and double R. Yes, they doubled the consonants there. I thought that was pretty awesome there at the end there. So here we have the narrator again speaking. Sprigs, I thought being trimmed was actually healthy for grass. Is that not true? Peter says, yes, their roots, rhizomes, and stolons grow right best when their stalks are trimmed. And all we cottontails want is what's best for the community. All you want? You eat all you want. Our roots and rhizomes were ripped. Our stolons were stolen. You munched and you crunched and you chewed our stems down. Yes, you mentioned that before. And look at you now. You are no longer wee little sprigs. You are full-grown grasses. You have energy to spare. You thrived under the consumer's grazing. When our sweet old Grandma first told us the facts of prairie life, she told us how this tale would end, and I might remind you, big, bad cottontail. You can call me Peter. I might remind you that you're only slightly higher on the food chain. You're also food. You refer, of course, to the secondary consumers. The secondary consumers are going to transfer our energy, buddy. Really, please call me Peter. There's no need to call names or engage in other contentious behaviors. So we have this word contentious that is highlighted here. Let's see if we can use context clues to figure out what that means. Peter says, really, please call me Peter. There's no need to call names or engage in other contentious behaviors. So what does he mean by calling names? There, if we back up and check for comprehension here, we are talking about being how far we up are on the food chain, correct? And he is saying, they're arguing a little bit about how far they up are on the food chain. You want to be higher up on the food chain, correct? Because if you're at the bottom, that means that something else is eating you, correct? So really, please call me Peter. There's no need to call names or engage in other contentious behaviors. And we're talking cottontails. Cottontails is another word for bunnies or rabbits, correct? And we're talking about, in this play, Peter Cottontail. So Peter Cottontail is saying, and other contentious behaviors. If we're calling names, do you think contentious behaviors would be other awful behaviors or impolite behaviors? That would make sense with what's going on and happening in the play. You have to kind of visualize that and stop every once in a while and back up and reread. Check for comprehension. What's going on? How are the characters interacting? What's causing this character to say that? Use your context clues. Narrator, in fact, we have a secondary consumer here today. Please welcome Mr. Wesley Wolf. Okay, we have more alliteration. Wesley Wolf, two words that start with the same thing. And what do you think? In the food chain, where would the wolf be in compared to Peter Cottontail? Yes, he would be above him, correct? Right, because a wolf would eat a rabbit. Sprig 1, in a sing-songy voice. These are stage directions right here because they're in parentheses. You don't read those out loud if you were acting in the play or you were the actors that had the part. These are stage directions. So you would read them in your head and then this tells you how to say it. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? The big bad wolf. So you would say it, that's how you would say it. Wesley, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with your other guests. I'd like to remind all of your guests of a simple fact. We're all part of the energy cycle. All of us transfer energy. Okay, that's important for our comprehension here. Even the decomposers have a part to play. We can all live and thrive in the same habitat. Speaking of which, Peter, I would love to have you for dinner one evening. Narrator, it would appear Peter Cottontail had somewhere else to be. My, but he does run rather quickly. Okay, so that's the end of the play that we had to read today. I hope you enjoy reading it. Don't forget to record yourself because you do get points for that. And as you're reading, make sure you're paying attention to spellings, vocabulary, stopping to figure out those words and decode them, also thinking about what they mean, and looking for that figurative language. Let's go ahead and wrap up our lesson today. So here's the text that we will be reading this week. It's drama is the genre, the Three Little Sprigs. And I can successfully read the star passage and identify the spelling of keywords and figurative language is what we did. So in conclusion, amazing readers read text multiple times. They also pay attention to the spelling of keywords and figurative language. Why do we do that? Well, I will become a more fluent reader and have a better understanding of what I have read. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed today's passage. It's fun because it is the genre of drama, and perhaps you can act that out at home with maybe a sibling or a parent or another adult. If you have any questions, reach out to your teachers. Enjoy the rest of your day, boys and girls.